Okay, so we are going to go and make a ornament, and it's a Christmas ornament that you're going to try to make, and this is the elements we can use. So snowflake, a Merry Christmas, a Christmas tree, nativity scene, a dog or a deer, and your choice of other elements. But for this, it should take you about 40 minutes to complete. So the first thing is these are the elements. You're going to find those in a Google Drive. So all of the elements will be part of a Google Drive, and you'll be able to see those inside of your classroom, Google Classroom folder. So starting off, it's just going to be a new Tinkercad, and we're going to create a new 3D design. And you're going to be able to start off by making the exterior shape of your given ornament. So we're just going to use a cylinder. I'm going to create a cylinder that is 100 mils in diameter. We're going to take that and we're going to make the height of that shape 3.6 millimeters. So it'll be 3.6 millimeters thick. We don't want to have it too thin, otherwise it will warp. So between 3.6 and 4.2. So that is your maximum sizes that you can use. We're going to be able to take, and I'm just going to duplicate this by going Control D, making a duplicate, and then I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to shrink down the size of this. And I'm going to shrink it down to 93 millimeters. So Control D, Shift, grab the corner element, left mouse button, and then drag it down to 93 millimeters. And that is going to be the hole that I'm going to create. So you'll see here that I actually have a hole element, and I can just position that in the center of my shape. So I can look at the top view and make sure it's in the center. So I have two shapes stacked on top of each other. One's going to be the hole that's going to be cutting away from the outside area. And then we can use the Shift key to select both elements. So if I use the Shift key, hold down Shift, left mouse button, and select both elements and group them, I'm going to be able to cut those apart. So we can see that again, that I take the given hole and I'm going to be able to take that element and I'm going to be able to pass it through. So for this shape, because it is, again, we want to make sure it's the same thickness. So I had a thickness of 4.2, so I'm going to go a little bit bigger on that one, 4.4, and then I can pass it through all the way to the bottom. Shift, select both, and then combine, and you can see that it starts to cut away the interior. So if I want, I can have a partially removed plastic, but for printing, to make sure you get it done today, we're going to want to make sure that passes all the way through. So that's the one thing we're going to want to make sure that happens, and pass that all the way through. So our thickness, again, I'm going to make this 4.9 just to make it super thick. Back down. And then I'm going to be able to join those together, and I can cut out a ring, so I have a ring to go around. Same thing, I can make another element for the top loop. I can use another cylinder that's going to go on the top there, and I can change that height. And I'm going to change the height down to, again, same 4.2, between 3.6 and 4.2. And I'm not going to join them quite yet. I'm just going to want to make sure that I can go and add, again, cut out the interior, Control B, duplicates that shape. I can then shrink that shape down in size. I can move it to the center by using the move tool. And I'm going to be able to then reposition that one just in the middle, right there. And again, change that part to a hole. And you can see that we're going to use that to cut out the interior. It's passing all the way through. And I'm going to just select both. I might have to zoom in with the scroll wheel and then pick both of those and join them together. And now I have a hoop. So again, this structure and that structure, I'm going to join all of them together. And now I have my outside of my Christmas ornament started. So now to add the elements, we can add some other parts. That's going to be the import button. So import files, and you can choose your files to drag in. I've saved those files already to my computer, so I have some of those files saved, like the Dr. Seuss. And here's when it imports that file. We can change its scale. So already it's going to be big, height's 2.5, but I can import it. If it's too big, I might have to shrink that down. I can shrink down that to say 60% its size, and it'll shrink everything down, and I can import. And this is going to be the one element that maybe I'm going to use. So it's going to import the file. And then once I import the file, I'll be able to use it on this stage. So it's just importing. It might take a second or two just because it's a larger file. So there it is. Now I said everything in my printing can be placed inside of my ornaments. Now this file that I have here, the tree, the thickness of the tree is only 1.5. Now that's too thin. So I want that to be a little bit less than the body height of the outside of the cylinder. So I'm going to make that height 3.6. And the outside here can be double checking. Remember that one's 4.2. And now that's part of this print. And to join them, I'm just going to either use the parts of the tree and embed it into the side. So it's going to stick together just enough where it has enough plastic embedded here on the side. And I can join them by Shift key, selecting the two elements, group together. And now I have that as one printed element. And that's great. The Dr. Seuss tree. I can add now, say, a Merry Christmas. So I can go into my files. Now I've downloaded those files already. So I can go into my Merry Christmas, decorative Merry Christmas. And I can again go import, find that file, take that file and drag it into the import. Size again, height. That's a little thin, so when I drag it in, I'm going to have to thicken it again. And your files do take a little bit to download, but you can bring them into your computer and then choose which ones you want to use. So there are a few elements I showed. There's a Christmas tree, there's a star, there's also the nativity scene. But up to yourself what you want to add to your Christmas ornament that you want to print. So once I get all of my elements placed, I might have to resize it a bit, maybe change its height. So I might have to just rotate. See, the height here again is a little too thin, 3.6, printing it off at the same thickness. Bring that into this area. I'm going to put it just above my Christmas tree. And I see that they're not joined and it's just floating, and I want them to be able to connect. So now I'm going to have to make a choice of how I want these ones to intersect with one another. So I could use a different tool you haven't seen before. There is this tool here, the scribble tool. I could click on it and say I'm going to place down some scribble. And basically the scribble tool you can see here in the preview, I can just go through and draw where I want to place my scribble. So I'm just going to say it's going to be something that goes along like that. And here it appears inside my given stage, and I can click done. Now this element I might use to go and connect my Merry Christmas to the rest of my shape, and I'm just going to drag it down so it's actually thinner. And now I'm going to drag that into there. So here you can see I've actually created this little structural bond between the tree element and the Christmas element on the other side. And I'm going to duplicate that. I'm just going to go Control D, drag it over, and I might even now be able to shrink it down. So I might just shrink this one down some, and then shrink this element down some. And now I can move it up into that part. So here I've now combined some type of structural support, and I've made it a little bit stronger across my ornament. So that is just now going to be grouped. So use the Shift key, select all the elements, and then I'm going to be able to group them all together. And again, now I have a very well done Merry Christmas ornament. If I wanted to add the year, I could go one more step and add the year. So I could go and then use the text, and I could type out the year that I want to write down. So inside of the text field, I'm just going to write down 2022. I can change the height again here. I can type in, I want to go 2.6, make it a little thinner, and then I can actually then go and maybe change my final height here. I'm going to maybe make it 12. Let's see what 12 looks like. Might be a bit big still. Go with a 5.6. And this I'm going to shrink down to a, let's see, 36. So there's a little 2022. Same thing, I can drag it in here. And now an element that I might want to attach it with, I might just use that given scribble tool again. And I might just do a little scribble, and I might just do something like that. So let's see what happens. So that shape, I'm again going to be able to shrink it down in height. Just go down to say 2 mils in height. Doesn't need to be super thick, but enough to print. I can drag it into there, and I can put it on my 2002. I do see some areas of concern. There's a little bit of that missing. So maybe I'm going to do just a little stand. And then I might add to this shape. I might drag it out. And I might need to add just a little bit more. So I might have to add another little scribble like that. Say done. And then this I'm going to shrink down again. 2 mils. And I'm just going to run it through my 2022 like that. So here I should be able to group all of those elements. And there I have a little nifty Christmas ornament for printing. So that is my printed Christmas ornament. Merry Christmas 2022. Perfect. And now I'll be able to export that. So when I'm done, I can export it as an actual, remember, STL file, and that STL file can be shared in the Google Classroom, and then it can be sent out for printing. The one thing we need to do is we need to change that name. So that name is not the name that I want to use for printing. I want to be able to change that name, and I want to be able to change that name, so I'm going to have to open it up and change the name and rename it. So inside of here, I'm going to have to go to rename this object, and it has to be your first name and your underscore last name in order to get printed. I can't print it unless it's that, and then put that file into the Google Classroom for printing. So hopefully that's going to be something we're going to be able to share, and then we can print them out in class.